So coming to the discussion of next chapter, which is closely related to economic outlook, how Indian economy would going have its effects, especially after COVID-19, whether it is in the form of medium term or long term. Let's look at the fifth chapter, which is nothing but deregulation and which regulates growth. So what is regulation of economy? So first you need to understand about what is regulation of economy. Each and every sector is tightly controlled by government itself. That is what we know as regulation. This was the earlier phenomena way back in 1990s and 92. After that, the government has realized that no more regulation is required. That is nothing but your license RA system. So that's why the government has initiated a new industrial economic policies after 1991. In a similar way, there is a second time of reforms required, which were necessary for Indian economy. So that's why most of the sectors, especially the critical sectors, require a deregulation in their existence. So the global economic landscape is undergoing a significant shift. Why? Because of geo-economic fragmentation. Whenever any government, especially United States of America, in its recent times when it has elected its new president, it has more focused on geo-economic fragmentation, GEF, nothing but deglobalization. And at the same time, climate transition challenges, especially developing nations and least developed countries are facing the brunt of climate changes. But majority of the times, the developed nations, they did not realize the climate change effects on economy. And at the same time, regulatory complexities. Each and every country has its own set of regulations. And at the same time, India did not have its coexistence of regulation practices. So in this scenario, India's medium-term growth outlook hinges on strategic deregulation, investment in emerging sectors, nothing but electric vehicles, and leveraging domestic growth levers. So on investing in these emerging sectors, India should achieve a medium-term better output. So if you look at India's medium-term outlook, the projected growth at 8% annually to achieve Vikshit Bharat by 2047. To get a tag of developed nation by 2047, India must grow at 8% annum. And if you look at IMF projections, India is set to become 5 trillion economy by financial year 2028 and 6.3 trillion by financial year 2030 with a 10.2% nominal growth rate in USD terms. So here you should understand about nominal growth rates. So there are two types of growth rates. One is nominal and the second one is real growth rate. Nominal growth rate is nothing but with inclusion of inflation at present market value. And when it comes to rupee, whether rupee would be appreciated or depreciated, if you look at rupee's outlook, it is expected to depreciation of only 0.5% annually. So each and every year since from 1950s to till date, and each year 0.5% is the currency depreciation, especially Indian rupee, when it compares to 3.3% over the last 30 years. And when it comes to current account deficit under the balance of payments, it is predicted to rise 2.2% of GDP by financial year 2030, which is reflecting increased investments. And at the same time, investment needs. Investment rate must increase to 35% of GDP from already existing 31% to sustain high growth. So why investments are very necessary for countries like India? So India has adopted mixed economic model. That's why public-private partnership is crucial for its economic growth. But when it comes to public investments, especially from governments, whether at central level or at the state level, so obviously the resources, financial resources required for any investments does not come from directly governments itself. That's why most of the times they will rope in private players. Why private players are required? Because of their research and development facilities and competitiveness in their work. So that's why investment needs are very necessary. And when it comes to sectoral priorities, manufacturing, artificial intelligence, robotics, biotechnology and MSMEs need policy focus for long-term sustainability. Why these sectoral areas are targeted under economic survey? Because these have highest potential of generating employment opportunities. If you look at manufacturing, India wants to develop a manufacturing hub, just like how China has developed in its last 30 years. In a similar way, India wants to achieve this tag. So obviously manufacturing will provide a better employment opportunities, and at the same time the world manufacturing output, the contribution from India should be very high. And these are emerging technologies, AI, robotics and biotechnology. India is the pharmacy hub of the world. In a similar way, the biotechnology needs to be developed. MSME sectors also plays a crucial role, especially by having large number of informal sector of Indian economy. So what is geo-economic fragmentation that was discussed in economic survey? It is a policy driven reversal of global economic integration, often influenced by geopolitical considerations, according to IMF 2023. So here in simple words, it is nothing but deglobalization. In each and every country, they want to make a manufacturing hubs in their countries itself. That is geo-economic fragmentation. Shift from hyper-globalization. Trade, capital and migration flows are becoming inward-looking, leading to reduced economic integration. In globalization era, most of the times, trade, capital and migration will be outward looking, right? But when it comes to geo-economic fragmentation, these will be inward looking. Nothing but the trade, capital and migration will be kept at inside the borders itself, and they will manufacture their industrial needs. That's where the problem arises, especially from United States and the wars between USA and China. And if you look at statistics on global economic fragmentation, global trade growth will be declined from 60% of GDP in 2012 to stagnation post 2020. During these 8 years, the 60% of GDP from 2012 to post 2020, it has been declined. FDI relocation. Global FDI flows are concentrating among geopolitical allies. So mostly these FDIs will be go through friend-shoring countries. Geopolitical allies which reflect a common political ideologies. Increase in trade barriers. Almost $887.7 billion in new trade restrictions in 2023-24, a 160% increase from previous year according to WTO. So the trade barriers have been consistently increased over 160% from 2022-23 to 23-24 according to WTO. Next one, factors leading to geo-economic fragmentation. First one is geopolitical tensions, whether it should be in the form of US-China trade wars, Russia-Ukraine conflicts and sanctions-based policies. Whether the reasons might be US-China trade war, Russia-Ukraine conflicts or any other sanctions-based policies. Based on these, the geo-economic fragmentation has been happened. Next one, national security concerns. Tech decoupling in artificial intelligence, semiconductors and energy. Next one, friend-shoring and near-shoring. Relocation of supply chains to politically stable regions, especially US Chips Act, European Union Critical Raw Materials Act. According to these countries, whoever have pioneered in semiconductors, especially, they have been relocating their supply chains from far countries to near their home countries. That's what we known as friendshoring or nearshoring. And environmental and labor regulations. Western nations imposing higher ESG compliance cost, fragmenting global supply chains. That is also one of the reason. Next, implications of GEF on global growth, especially world economic growth. Reduced trade deficiencies. Global trade growth could slow down by 7% of GDP under severe fragmentation scenarios, according to IMF 2023. Next one is lower FDI for emerging markets. Why FDI are required for emerging markets? Because in the initial years, the governments does not have any financial resources to cater their countries. That's why majority of the times developing nations are underdeveloped countries. They require a huge FDIs. But because of these geo-economic fragmentations, these share of FDI, especially in these emerging countries, will gradually decline. That is, investment shift from high-income nations to limiting capital availability. So, the capital availability in developing nations are very low. Next one, knowledge diffusion. Limited cross-border research and development collaboration stifles innovations. So if you look at globalization, so during globalization period, especially LPG era, most of the times the research and development facilities from advanced countries to developing nations have been continuously flowing. But what about during geo-economic fragmentation or deglobalization era? These limited cross-border research and development collaboration will obviously stifle the economic growth and at the same time innovation in different sectors of the economy. That is also knowledge diffusion decline. Next one, climate transition and China's role. China's manufacturing dominance. By 2030, China will account for 45% of the global manufacturing output, according to UNIDO. Just before India has adopted its LPG reforms way back in 1980s, the China has gone for these LPG reforms. So that's why China has become one of the most industrialized zones and manufacturing hub of the world. In a similar way, India wants to achieve this status, and that's why Make in India program and productive linked incentive schemes PLI 1.0 and 2.0 were recently released for different sectors of Indian economy. So according to UNIDO, the China will account for 45% of the global manufacturing by 2030. And critical minerals dependency. China's process 65% of nickel, 68% of cobalt. These are very important for your prelims point of view. And 60% of lithium essential for electric vehicle batteries. So that's why critical minerals security, national critical minerals program, national critical minerals, and at the same time with the developed nations, India has getting a agreements for essential supply of critical minerals for its electric vehicles segment. Solar and wind energy dependence. China controls 80% of the global solar panel manufacturing, according to International Energy Agency IEA. Next, risk to energy transition. GEF driven trade restrictions could lower global EV and renewable investments by 30% by 2030. So how this will happen? So during GEF, obviously the countries are restricted their trade, investments and services to the rest of the world. So when these restrictions are very high, obviously the critical minerals, critical equipments required for electric vehicle segment would be reduced. Renewable investments will be reduced according to IMF 2023. Implications for India's growth. Are there any implications for India's economic growth because of these geo-economic fragmentations? Increased energy import dependence. 75% of India's lithium-ion battery imports are from China. So that is one of the major implications. Higher manufacturing cost. Supply chain disruptions can escalate production expenses. If these supply chains are frequently disrupted, then obviously the import of these materials will become expensive. When these become very expensive, the production process will also become expensive, and the products will, at the end of the day, products will become also expensive. Next, opportunity for self-reliance. This is the exact time where India need to focus on their domestic manufacturing capabilities. That's why government has come up with the PLI scheme under Atmanirbhar Bharat after COVID-19. PLI schemes and domestic mining policies can reduce dependency on China. That is the implications. Next one, electric vehicles in India and what are the growth and challenges. Electric vehicles market. The current market share is 5% of total electric vehicle sales in 2023, which is projected to reach 30% by 2030 according to NITI Aayog. Next one, battery dependency. 80% of electric batteries are imported with China as the dominant supplier. But this has a problem. If any supply chain disruptions will happen in future also, just like how it was done in COVID-19, the battery dependency, almost 80% of our batteries are imported from China. Then obviously, the electric vehicle segment will also be affected. Green investment. India needs $20 billion annually to develop electric vehicle charging and manufacturing infrastructure. That's why the adoption of electric vehicles in India is very slow phase. Why? Because there is no proper charging facilities. Except in majority cities, in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, there is no manufacturing facilities, and infrastructure is also one of the biggest problem. To resolve this issue, obviously India needs a $20 billion annually. That's not a small amount to invest in only electric vehicles sectors. Next, government schemes for electric vehicles. So there are some government schemes especially which are promoting the electric vehicles adoption in India. The first one is FAME 1 and FAME 2. According to FAME 2, 10,000 crore rupees were allocated. The major focus would be demand side incentives. Nothing but it will provide subsidies to electric vehicle buyers who are buying these electric vehicles. Obviously, they are given subsidies to enhance adoption and affordability. That's what under FAME 2 the government is promoting. Next one, PLI scheme for ACC batteries. Under 18,100 crores was allocated. The focus would be supply side incentive, which encourage local battery production to minimize import dependence. So whoever producing the batteries domestically in India, obviously they are given the incentives. So for what purpose they have been given incentives? To reduce the dependency on another countries. On that you need to focus on domestic manufacturing of batteries. Next, Kanish Bidesh India Limited, which is focused on raw material security, which ensures availability of critical minerals from global sources of EV manufacturing. So obviously here Kabil, it is a government public sector enterprise which mostly focuses on raw materials security across the globe. EV battery recycling policy, which focus on circular economy, nothing but promote sustainable battery reuse, reduce import dependency. And what are the challenges? Lack of domestic battery production. So obviously the Indian government has a lack of domestic battery production. That's why majority of the batteries are imported from China. India has limited lithium reserves, increasing dependency on the imports. That's where the problem arises again for our balance of payments also. Next one, high cost of electric vehicles. Limited economies of scale make EVs more expensive than conventional vehicles. So here the economies of scale for electric vehicles is very low. That's why these electric vehicles are very costly. And at the same time, these are very expensive than conventional vehicles. Charging infrastructure gaps. India has only 8,700 public chargers, where China has over 5 million charging stations. Nothing but 50 lakhs charging stations from China, and India has only 8,700 public charging utilities. So what would be the way forward for to overcome these issues? Battery manufacturing incentives would be provided, which expand PLI benefits to alternative batteries like sodium ion and solid state. EV charging expansion should be done. Government private partnership, nothing but public private partnership to install charging stations in urban and highway corridors especially, that should be done. Mining and processing investments, increase domestic lithium exploration, leveraging reserves in Jammu and Kashmir. Already Jammu and Kashmir has proven its lithium reserves, but it is on a large, not on a larger scale, it is a smaller scale. That's why you need to rope in more private investments. And growth through deregulation. What is the need for deregulation? Obviously, the MSMEs are facing a bottlenecks through high compliance cost, because of high compliance cost which hinders small business growth, limiting scalability of their business operations. Formalization barriers. Over regulation leads to informality. So each and everything should be comes under the government control, but it is not possible in reality, right? That's why over regulation sometimes leads to informalization of economy. What generally required for economies is formalization of economy, but in reverse case under MSME sectors, these are comes under the informal sectors because of over regulation from governments, reducing productivity and tax compliance, which will also affect. Regulatory overlaps, multiple licenses and long approval process discourage new business ventures. So that is one of the major problem in India's business environment. How deregulation act as a catalyst, which will boost investments. Easier regulations attract FDI. When regulations are very easier, obviously FDIs will come to the countries and domestic capital, improving economic growth. Next one, because of these FDIs ventured into the India's economy, they will obviously create a jobs, which will encourage job creation. Flexible labor laws allow business to hire and expand workforce efficiently and enhance global competitiveness, which is nothing but reduced bureaucratic red tape, improves ease of doing business rankings in India. Of course, this ease of doing business was discontinued in 2021. After that, they have come up with a Be Ready Index, which was published by World Bank itself. So these are important for prelims point of view. So what are some of the existing practices and what are the new practices that can be easily deregulated, right? The shift from existing practices to new, more effectively regulatory approvals is essential for fostering economic growth and enhancing efficiency and ensuring business competitiveness. From rigid regulation to flexible frameworks. So if you look at existing practices, fixed one size fits all regulatory mandates for the present norm in India. Then what should be the new practice? New practice should be adaptive regulations that allow flexibility based on industry needs. Whatever industry needs, based on that, regulations will be provided. Example, South Korea's flexible working hour averaging system. So that is one of the new practice. From lengthy approvals to as of right development. Pre-construction approvals with multiple bureaucratic steps were the old existing practice. In that place, we should adopt a new practice, that is streamlined as a self-certification models. We should not go to each and every department every time. Otherwise, self-certification models are essential. Yes, as of right development approach, reducing delays. Next one, land use restrictions to mixed use development. What was the existing practice? Segregated zoning laws restricting economic dynamism. New practice will be mixed use urban planning. So Japan allowing multi-use buildings in densely populated areas. So these are some of the existing practices that were in India, and at the same time what should be India's new approach by adopting new practices. From compliance burden to digital governance, the existing practices was paper-based compliance requiring multiple approvals each and every time. But what about the new practice? Single window digital approvals, mostly through digital. India's ease of doing business 2.0 with online compliance platforms. You should not depend upon complete pen and paper model. From high tariffs to competitive pricing. What was the existing practice? High industrial electricity tariffs reducing cost competitiveness. But what about the new practice? Cost based tariffs. So what were the cost that were incurred for the companies, especially electricity companies, generating companies? Based on their cost, the tariffs would be applicable. Example, Vietnam's discounted electricity for industries. From strict labor laws to flexible workforce policies. Existing was rigid labor laws limiting employment flexibility, and new practices sector-based flexibility. Example, India's IT sector labor laws relaxation allowing night shifts. And from government monopoly to public-private collaboration. Existing practice is nothing but state and regulatory enforcement with slow process. When state governments are involved, obviously it will take a slow process. So in that place, obviously the private participation in regulatory enforcement is required. Example, Australia and Canada's public-private partnership for building approvals. Not in all the sectors, at least where the sector's feasibility is available, in those sectors at least encourage private sector's participation for regulatory approvals. So in India, there are some key deregulation reforms were carried out. The first one is Jan Vishwas Act 2023, which decriminalized 183 provisions across 42 acts, which reducing the compliance risk. PLI scheme, which incentivized manufacturing expansion, supporting domestic production and exports. Ease of doing business 2.0 introduced a sector-specific deregulation to simplify business operations. Next one, online compliance platforms, which are digital approvals and automated compliance process to cut red tapeism. So next one, the conclusion for this chapter will be India's economic aspirations require targeted policy actions. So India wants to become a developed nation by 2047, right? To achieve these developed state, right? Developed state, obviously you need a targeted policy action. So one size does not fit for all. Strategic deregulation and investment in emerging industries. These are very important areas where India should focus. By reducing regulatory burdens, enhancing economic freedom, and building self-reliance in sectors like electric vehicles, renewable energy, India can achieve sustainable, inclusive, and high-growth development by focusing on these sectors. The time is right for UODB 2.0, ensuring India remains globally competitive while unlocking domestic potential. So that is the discussion for this chapter. Okay, the fourth chapter, which is related to inflation. So this inflation topic is very important for your prelims point of view, and at the same time which is having a highest importance for your mains understanding also. So what we discussed in economic survey, let's have a look at. Inflation remains a critical economic indicator affecting global and domestic economies. Why? Both domestic and global economies would be affected because of inflation. If inflation is very high, if you take an example, let's suppose in India's case, if inflation has crossed its 4% plus or minus 2, right? Then it would be better for the companies to invest in India's economy. So whenever inflation is very high, the investors are very interested to invest in these economies. But then what about the problems? The problems are for consumers. Consumers will be affected greatly because of inflation. So that's why both domestic and global economies will affect by inflation. But global inflation peaked in 2022 because most of us know during that time supply chain disruptions, especially caused by COVID-19, and at the same time not only COVID-19, even some other major political events were also happened during that time. So if you take an example of Russia-Ukraine conflicts, because of these conflicts the supply chain disruptions were happened, and geopolitical tensions in various parts of the world, it has a since moderated. Then after onwards, from 2022 and 23 onwards, the global inflation has gradually moderated. But when it comes to India, retail inflation CPI, consumer price index, has eased in financial year 2025 due to policy interventions, nothing but your monetary policy committee decisions, MPC decisions. Through food inflation remained high, even though the overall inflation have been gradually moderated, but the food inflation remains high due to supply chain disruptions and extreme weather events. If extreme weather events, let's suppose droughts or floods, if these were happen to your agriculture practices, then obviously the supply of agriculture commodities in the market will be reduced. When supply is reduced, obviously the prices will shoot up. That is one case. And first one is supply side. Because of supply side disruptions, the majority of the imports, energy imports are made by imports from different nations. That's where your imported inflation comes into the picture. So global inflation trends. Global inflation reached 8.7% in 2022, but declined to 5.7% in 2024 due to policy tightening. Nothing but your central bank's interventions. So if in India's case, let's suppose to control inflation, what RBI will do? RBI will increase repo rate and the reserve requirements. These will be done, right? These are the policy interventions by respect to central banks. This is according to IMF 2025. Next one, monetary policy impact. Central banks globally rise in interest rates, leading to declining inflation and stable output growth. That is also from monetary policy perspective. Food inflation moderation. While global food inflation softened, emerging economies like Brazil, India and China experienced divergence due to local supply constraints. Here, domestic supply constraints because of lack of infrastructure facilities or warehouse facilities or storage facilities. Because of all these supply chain constraints, especially present in these economies, whether Brazil, India, China, it has experienced a divergence due to its supply chain constraints. World Bank estimates commodity prices will decline by 5.1% in 2025, led by oil price reductions. Because of oil price reductions according to World Bank 2024. Next one, domestic inflation trends. Overall inflation, retail inflation in India reduced from 5.4 to 4.9, which is within the range between 4% plus or minus 2, right? According to Monetary Policy Committee, flexible inflation targeting framework between Government of India and RBI. That is Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation 2025 data. When it comes to core inflation, it has dropped its lowest in decade, primarily due to a decline in global commodity prices. Because of global commodity prices have dropped, the core inflation has also dropped in India. Next, food inflation, which is remained high due to extreme weather and supply chain disruptions driven mainly by vegetables and pulses. So, this is the main culprit in India's inflation story. Energy and food. These are the two components where they have played a critical role in controlling the inflation. So, in food inflation, these are remained high due to extreme weather events and at the same time supply chain disruptions. What are the factors driving domestic inflation? What might be the domestic reasons to drive up these inflation pressures? Extreme weather events, heat waves and unseasonal rainfalls increased crop damage. Obviously, when crop damage has happened, which reduces the supply. Heat wave frequency rose from 5% in 2020 to 18% in 2024, which is very high according to IMD data 2024. Supply chain disruptions. Floods and transportation delays lead to volatile vegetable prices, particularly for onions and tomatoes. That's why there was a government scheme called TOP scheme, tomato, onion, potatoes. Whenever any price fluctuations happen in these three commodities, the government will intervene in the market to stabilize these prices. This is also important for your prelims point of view. Production shortfalls. Pulses like tur dal saw declining output, increasing reliance on imports. When domestically these products are declining their output, obviously you need to import from other nations. Global oil prices. Fluctuations impacted transportation and agriculture input cost because of global oil prices fluctuations also. Trends in onion and tomato production. Production volatility. Onion and tomato production declined due to extreme weather and affecting supply and prices. When it comes to onion prices, inflationary prices persisted in financial year 24-25 due to a 30% drop in Rabi onion production. Horticulture statistics 2024. Tomato supply constraints. Prices hiked intermittently due to perishability and 67% production dependency on the Rabi season. Next one, import limitations. India and China contribute 50% of the global onion production, limiting import options. Pure inflation, pure dal. Production, consumption and the trends. Production decline. It was fell by 13.6% in 2023, 10.8% in 23-24, leading to high inflation according to Ministry of Agriculture 2025. High inflation correlation. A 0.8% correlation between production decline and inflation indicates lower supply causes prices hikes. And when it comes to imports, to bridge this gap, demand and supply, 7.7 lakh tons of tur were imported in 24, mainly from Mozambique, Tanzania and Myanmar. These countries are very important. So sometimes questions might be framed from which countries were importing these tur dal. Measures taken to control inflation, buffer stock and price stabilization. 4.7 lakh million tons of onions procured under the price stabilization fund according to Consumer Affairs Ministry 2025. Stock limits. Wheat, pulses and onions had stock limits imposed to prevent hoarding because it will hoarding the commodities, prevention of hoarding. Obviously, the supply will be available to the general public or market, in the market. Import policy adjustments. So, duty-free import of pulses extended till March 2025. Yellow peas allowed until February 2025 based on case by case on imported goods. Subsidized sales. Bharat brand wheat, rice, pulses and vegetables sold at reduced prices, just like how we are getting our PDS entitlements. In a similar way, Government of India has come up with Bharat brand, especially wheat, rice, pulses and vegetables will be sold at reduced prices. Next, what is the way ahead? Develop climate resilient crops. So that is the only way to control inflation strikes and at the same time drought resistant varieties to stabilize yields. Strengthen supply chain logistics. Expand cold storage and warehousing to minimize post harvest losses. Enhance market monitoring. Implement high frequency data systems to prevent speculative hoarding and price hikes. In India's case, most of the times why these prices, especially food inflation, is very high because of hoarding and price hikes by temporarily. Increase domestic pulse production. Utilize rice fallow lands for expanding pulse cultivation so that at least we can reduce our imports from various nations. Deregulation for investments in agri-tech. Encourage private sector participation in precision farming and AI driven weather prediction models. And if you look at conclusion, India's inflation outlook remains stable with the CPI projected at 4.2% in financial year 2026. While global commodity prices have expected to decline, climate shocks, supply bottlenecks and oil prices volatility pose different types of risk. And long-term inflation control requires climate resilient farming, efficient supply chains and policy flexibility to stabilize food prices and ensure economic resilience. So that is the discussion related to inflation. So here we need to focus mostly on the trends, especially whether global inflation and at the same time India's inflation conditions were moderated or not, and what were the different types of initiatives taken up by government to control or to ease the inflation pressure in the economy. So that is the discussion for this chapter. So the next chapter would be on investment and infrastructure, keeping it going, whether investment and infrastructure are going ahead or are there any bottlenecks are associated with these investments. Let's look at capital expenditure from Government of India perspective. The capital expenditure by Union government on major infrastructure sectors, especially atomic energy, civil aviation, telecommunications, renewable energy, power, road, rural development, ports, housing, and urban affairs and railways, has been increased at a trend rate of 38.8% from last 5 years, financial year 2022-24. Capital expenditure, especially when it comes to investments and infrastructure, these are long term in nature and these are very required for to grow our infrastructure. And when it comes to national infrastructure pipeline, it was launched with a forward looking approach targeting projected infrastructure investments around 111 lakh crores from financial year 2020-25, and it was launched in August 2021 to boost private investments in brownfield assets. What are brownfield assets? Already these assets were set up. These are not greenfield in nature. Already there have been infrastructure facilities are available. On top of it, we are going to develop another infrastructure models. The initiative laid down the framework for monetization policy, identified pipeline potential core assets with an indicative value of 6 lakh crores for the period 3 years from financial year 2022-25. So let's understand the national infrastructure pipeline. It is nothing but economic and social infrastructure projects which will encompass. So under national infrastructure pipeline, mostly they are focusing on economic and social infrastructure projects. Sectors such as energy, roads, urban, railways are projected to account for 70% of the capital expenditure in infrastructure from 2020-25. The plan outlines an investment of 102 lakh crores in infrastructure projects by 2024-25, with the center, states and private sector sharing the capital expenditure in 39-39-22 formula. So this formula is important. Why infrastructure sector receiving more emphasizing on these days? Because pandemic induced slowdown. That was the major reason. The slowdown caused by pandemic presents an opportunity to invest in infrastructure and boost economic growth. Multiplier effect on job creation and economy. Nothing but if you develop a proper infrastructure, obviously it will create a job creation. Infrastructure spending stimulates the economic activity. When economic activity is in streamline, then job creation will be done. Inclusive growth. Quality infrastructure is crucial for both economic growth and inclusive development. Access to essential social services. Inadequate infrastructure not only hinders economic development but also imposes additional cost on people trying to access essential services. So nothing but if you provide a proper infrastructure, whether physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, then obviously people will come under inclusive governance. If you are not providing these infrastructure facilities, obviously they are left out of your inclusive approach. Then the government will pay additional burden to get them back into the inclusive growth. So national monetization pipeline, it is a roadmap for identifying potential monetization of projects across various infrastructure sectors. It was announced in the budget 2021-22 for monetization of assets, ideally free lying infrastructure projects, especially from Government of India. These will be provided to private players, but the majority of the management will be rest with Government of India itself. Worth an estimated 6 lakh crore. Only core assets of the government are monetized under national monetization pipeline. Non-core assets are not included under NMP. So what is the major objective? To unlock value in brownfield sector projects by tapping private sector capital. So here these infrastructure requires a huge finances. Then obviously government does not have huge finances. So private sectors will be encouraged to do investments in brownfield sectors, and they will make efficient utilization of funds and using the funds generated for greenfield infrastructure creation across India. So once these brownfield projects were developed by private sectors, after that the funds generated from these brownfields will be utilized for the creation of new sectors, that is greenfield sectors across infrastructure. Framework: brownfield assets have been de-risked from execution risk and have stable revenue streams. Monetization of rights, not ownership, as the primary ownership continues to be with Government of India. These projects will be handed over to private players, but not ownership. Ownership lies with Government of India itself. The assets will be handed back to the public authority at the end of transaction life, that is duration 4 years, 2022-25, both are inclusive years. And what are the challenges? Obviously lack of identifiable revenue streams. From which infrastructure projects the government will get revenues? So there is no clear identification of projects. Which projects will yield better revenues? That is the major problem. Regulatory issues. The government's retention of ownership rights may create fear under undue political interference, lack of operational autonomy and corruption. So obviously the government has the ownership itself, but the properties were given to private player. There might be a nexus between private players and at the same time government, which may interfere in their operational autonomy and at the same time sometimes leads to corruption. That is also one of the regulatory issues. Lack of independent sectoral regulators. Example, railways, roads, ports sectors. These independent sectors does not have a regulators to regulate these infrastructure activities. Asset specific challenges. For example, low capacity utilization in gas and petroleum pipeline networks, regulated tariffs in power sector, low interest in national highways below 4 lanes, etc. These are asset specific challenges that were present to the infrastructure projects. Price rise for the end user due to the transfer of public infrastructure to the private sector. That is obviously the problem arises when any government properties are handed over to private sectors. When private sectors are developing any infrastructure, then obviously at the end of the day, most of the public, what they felt about these projects is obviously the end user price will be rise. Possibility of monopoly and cronyism, where few business houses corner the bulk of assets. Only the larger section of industrial or business entities, they will capture the business hours, which is the possibility of monopoly of these areas infrastructure and at the same time crony capitalism. And the railways, between April and October 2024, 17 new pair of one-day Bharat trains were introduced to networks and 228 coaches were produced. And what are the recent initiatives in the rail system? Gati Shakti multi-modal cargo terminal, 91 CGD commissioned and 233 locations approved by 2024. Under the net zero carbon emissions, the Department of Railways, especially Railway Department, has commissioned a 30 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030 with 375 MW of solar and 103 of wind commission as of 2024. Major economic corridors, 434 projects valued at 11.1 lakh 7 crores have been identified under 3 railway corridors mapped under the PM Gati Shakti portal. Under this portal, you will get all the details about the infrastructure projects across India. Public-private partnership. 17 projects have been completed and 8 ongoing under the Triple-P model. Major projects. Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed railway project sanctioned in 2015 with 508 kilometers, supported by Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, most of the times. Has revised cost of 1.08 lakh crores. As of 2024, it has achieved 47.17% physical progress with expenditure of 67,000 crores. Dedicated freight corridors. As of November 2024, 2,741 kilometers of the planned 2,843 kilometers DFC network has been commissioned, but these have transformed logistics in India by facilitating increased freight volumes without passenger train interference. Steps for enhancing passenger amenities in railways. Indian Railways is undertaking several initiatives to enhance passenger experience in station amenities. So mostly focusing on redevelopment, station redevelopment, affordable health care facilities at station premises, improving catering services, and supporting local artisans. Amrut Bharat Station Scheme, which is aimed at enhancing railway station amenities. 1337 stations have been identified for redevelopment. Pradhan Mantri Bharatiya Jan Aushadha Kendras, affordable medicine in pursuit of enhanced wellness and welfare of passengers passing through railway stations. 50 PM BJKS were started in railway stations premises, providing affordable medications and health care services at railway stations. Food and catering services. A new policy for managing mobile catering was introduced on November 14, and it has resulted in the establishment of 557 base kitchens to cater the food needs of the passengers. One station, one product. This scheme is operational at 900 stations, featuring 2,163 outlets that benefit 79,380 local artisans by providing sales opportunities for their products. Next, passenger amenities. Train indication boards have been provided at 135 stations, coach guidance systems, and Wi-Fi availability across various stations. And to improve signaling systems in railways, the government has come up with a modernization of its signaling systems to enhance operational efficiency and safety. And elimination of mechanical signaling. Indian Railways is replacing mechanical signaling with electrical and electronic interlocking systems to prevent the collisions. Kavach, this indigenously developed automated train protection system has seen 1,547 crore investment till November 2024. Electronic interlocking EI systems have been installed, increasing the coverage to a total 3,576 stations. The first direct drive interlocking system was commissioned in November 2024 at Tajpur station. This is important. Automatic block signaling being installed to enhance capacity to on high density routes. Signal design automation tool for electronic interlocking, that is nothing but the tool automation route control charge generation for station ads. When it comes to road transport, development of national highways, progress from a project based approach to corridor based approach. The shift from project based national highway development to corridor based approach helped increase the highways length from 91,287 kilometers in 2014 to 1.46 lakh kilometers in 2024. The National Industrial Corridor Development Program, which aims to create advanced industrial cities in India, positioning them as a manufacturing and investment hubs. Bharatmala Pariyojana, which was started in 2017, which aims to develop 34,800 kilometers of national highways. Chardham Mahamarg Pariyojana. As of 2024, a road project connected to all 4 Chardhams through the highways with a length of 825 kilometers and 620 kilometers has been completed. National high speed corridors length expanded from 93 kilometers to 2,476 kilometers in 2024. 4-lane and above national highways excluding HSCs, national high speed corridors, the length grew approximately 2.5 times from 18,300 kilometers between 2014 to 2024. So key initiatives for logistics efficiency in road connectivity. To improve road connectivity, key initiatives undertaken include traffic management on highways, establishment of logistics parks, sustainable vehicle scrappage policy, ongoing ropeway projects, advanced traffic management system. Installed about 4,000 kilometers of national highways for efficient traffic management and emergency response. Multimodal logistics park till December 2024, 6 MMLPs Chennai, Indore, Nagpur, Jalna, Jogi Gopa and Bangalore have been awarded. National Highways Maintenance Policy, contractual maintenance for entire NH network is managed through performance based maintenance contracts of 5 to 7 years or short term maintenance contracts of 1 to 2 years. Additionally, long term maintenance contracts of 20 years are undertaken through toll operate transfer mode and investment trusts. Next, when it comes to vehicle scrapping policy, incentives or disincentives based policy with 82 registered vehicles scrapping facilities operational across 19 states, having scrapped about 1.62 lakh vehicles. Next, ropeway projects development, especially in hilly areas. Projects at Varanasi, Dosi Hills, DG Mahadev and Ujjain have been awarded and 10 more are under bidding. Civil aviation, airport operators and developers, including Airports Authority of India, are pursuing capital expenditure plan exceeding 91,000 crores for the next coming 5 years. Major achievements under port sector infrastructure development. Vadvan mega port, over 76,000 crores have been invested in developing the port, which will have 9 container terminals and various berths. Palghar district. Tuticorin International Container Terminal, it is designed to handle 6 lakh 20 foot equivalent units annually and accommodate container vessels up to 10,000 TEUs. 20 foot equivalent units are used to measure capacity of a container. And outer harbour at Tuticorin, the project aims to boost port capacity of 4 million TEUs with 1,000 meter terminals. Port-led industrialization. Union Cabinet approved 12 new industrial smart cities with an investment of 28,602 crores across 10 states along with 8 additional sanctioned projects. Utilization of salt lands. Around 25,000 acres of salt lands have been identified to enhance port sector infrastructure. International linkages. The Chabahar Port, International North-South Transport Corridor, Shahid Basti Port at Chabahar connects Mumbai to Eurasia via INST, which reduced the transport cost and time. This led to a 43% increase in vessel traffic and 34% rise in container traffic. Sitwe Port, which was located at Myanmar, is a part of Kaladan Multimodal Project KMP. Offers an alternative route to northeastern states, reducing transport cost between Kolkata and Mizoram by leveraging this Sitwe Port. Triple P project. The central government approved 98 Triple P projects, including 23 captive projects worth around 69,800 crores, excluding Vadvan Port project, with a Triple P investment of 38,000 crores. Currently, 56 projects valued at 41,480 crores are operational, increasing port capacity by approximately 550 million tons per annum. Inland waterways transformation. India is enhancing waterway connectivity to the northeast by developing waterways in Bangladesh and funding 80% of the 305 crores project. It is also investing 1,010 crores to improve the Brahmaputra and Barak rivers and the Indo-Bangladesh protocol route. The key initiatives: Harit Nauka guidelines, which was launched in 2024, aim to green 1,000 inland vessels to cover the next 10 years. Cargo promotion scheme. The initiative encourages cargo owners to switch from rail and road to inland waterways transport, promoting it as a sustainable alternative. River cruise tourism. Improved waterways have benefited both cargo and tourism, with 82,587 passengers on day cruises by October 2024 and a 5-fold increase in night cruise passengers compared to financial year 2019. Jal Marg Vikas projects on National Waterways 1. The project enhances cargo transport on Ganga Bhagirathi Hooghly river system, achieving 65% physical progress with a revised cost of 5,000 crores. Jal Marg Vikas project 2, Earth Ganga, focused on sustainable development. Project includes construction of a community jetties and navigation improvements with 49 out of 60 approved community jetties and already commissioned. Next, when it comes to power sector, the power sector network continues to expand with installed capacity rising by 7.2% 1 year as of November 2024. Measures initiated to facilitate consumers to enhance energy infrastructure. Measures have been undertaken to simplify rooftop solar installations, support EV charging, expedite new electricity connections, and facilitate a better consumer experience. Rooftop solar PV simplification rules were amended in 24 to ease and accelerate installation of rooftop solar systems. Approvals for systems of up to 10 kilowatts of no longer require feasibility studies, and timeless for larger systems and commissioning were significantly reduced. EV charging connections. Consumers can now obtain a separate electricity connections for charging electric vehicles, supporting India's net zero goals by 2070. Faster new connections. Timelines for obtaining new electricity connections were reduced. Consumer choice in metering. Residents of group housing societies and residential colonies are chosen either individual or single point electricity connections. It has promoted a transparency and flexibility. Meter reading accuracy. If a consumer disputes their meter reading, the license must install an additional meter within 5 days to verify consumption over 3 months, ensuring billing accuracy. Space-based infrastructure monitoring platforms. ISRO advanced geospatial platforms playing a pivotal role in infrastructure monitoring and management. They will look for infrastructure monitoring. The initiative supports a range of projects from rural development and electrical infrastructure to judicial and urban planning, enhance efficiency and tracking progress. ISRO's Bhuvan platform. This was old one. It supports infrastructure monitoring under schemes like MNREGA, watershed component of PM-KSY, irrigation for all, at different stages of implementation. Electrical infrastructure management. Bhuvan facilities of the management electrical infrastructure in Maharashtra and Telangana through web GIS, Geographic Information System portals, and Nyaya Vikas portal for judicial infrastructure, developed in collaboration with the Department of Justice. The portal monitors 2,840 judicial projects using web GIS and mobile geotagging, with 7,900 geotags created to track progress of judicial infrastructure. Urban geospatial databases for Amrut cities especially. ISRO has created a large-scale 2D geospatial databases for 238 Amrut cities, assisting in developing GIS-based master plans for urban planning. So that is the discussion for investments and what are the different initiatives taken by Government of India for the development of investment and infrastructure, and so far what were the achievements, what were the different initiatives were taken by governments. So that is the discussion for investment and infrastructure chapter under economic survey.